Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Planning Commission meeting. It's March 15th, 2021. First item up is roll call.
Kelly Graham.
Here.
Malin Luttrell.
Here.
Mark Webb.
Here.
Margaret Firerobin.
Here.
Jason Boer.
Here.
Zakai Shu.
Here.
Joel Staten is here. Scott Gaynor.
Here.
Kevin Buck.
Here.
All present and accounted for, sir.
Thank you, sir. This meeting is being held electronically, and we will have a discussion about the necessity. Counselor, if you'd lead us off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you all know, Governor Lee has suspended the provisions of the Open Meetings Act at least until April 28th, 2021, to the extent necessary to allow governing bodies to conduct their essential business by electronic means rather than meeting personally. One condition of meeting electronically is that if a member of staff or the Planning Commission is attending by audio only, you are asked to identify yourself by name and position whenever you speak. In order to proceed with meeting electronically, the Planning Commission should make a determination that meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. At this time, if the Planning Commission members need to discuss that, they should have that discussion. Otherwise, assuming there's a motion in a second, they should vote by roll call to determine whether the meeting electronically is appropriate at this time.
Thank you very much. Is there any discussion? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to meet electronically. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Who seconded it?
Yeah,
Kelly
Mark
Graham.
Webb. Mark Webb seconded.
Okay.
Roll call.
Thank you. Kelly Graham.
Yes.
Malin Luttrell.
Yes.
Mark Webb.
Yes.
Margaret Firerobin.
Yes.
Jason Boer.
Yes.
Zakai Shu.
Yes.
Joel Staten is yes. Scott Gaynor.
Yes.
Kevin Buck.
Yes.
Hey, we're done, sir.
Thank you, sir. Next up is the approval of minutes, February 15th. You've got a copy of them. Any changes, additions, or corrections? Hearing, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there a second?
Kevin, I second.
And Kevin is the second. Roll call.
Thank you, Kevin. Kelly Graham.
Yes.
Malin Luttrell.
Yes.
Mark Webb.
Yes.
Margaret Firerobin.
Yes.
Jason Boer.
Yes.
Zakai Shu.
Yes.
Joel Staten is yes. Scott Gaynor.
Yes.
Kevin Buck.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is unscheduled comments from the public. The public will be giving or have the ability to give comments twice tonight. Once right now. So if there's anything that anybody wants to discuss that is not on the agenda, what we need you to do is to call in. The number's on the screen. Number's not on, yeah, there it is. The number is on the screen, and call in if there's something that you want to say. In a minute, we're going to take a pause for any calls to come in. The other time tonight that we are going to take a pause and have people call in is during the rezoning request on the Weaver Pike property. So those will be the two opportunities. So if there's anything you want to discuss, you being the public, that you want to discuss with us, please call in now. So we'll take a little bit of a pause to see if anybody's going to call in. All right, welcome back to the Planning Commission meeting. There were no phone calls on any unscheduled items. However, we are expecting a phone call and some input on some of the other items. We'll now go to the next agenda item, which is old business. We show none. Tim, does that stand no old business?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. We'll go to new business, which is the rezoning request. And we know we will have some input on this one.
Yes, and I will promote the two participants right now. It will be Mr. Still and Mr. and Miss Baggett, and I will promote them. But while Sheriff's giving the presentation, I'll promote them. But this is a rezoning request for the property at Weaver Pike and Kent Hook Hill Road. It is in our urban growth boundary, but outside the corporate limits. The request is to go from R1 low density single family residential district, the county zoning, to B3 general business service district, which is another county zoning. And with that, I'll let Sheriff give the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Beavers. So tonight we are going to be looking at a request to rezone, as Tim said, within the urban growth boundary from R1 to B3. The owner is Mr. and Mrs. Steele, who are on the phone with us tonight. Also, as Tim said, the Baggetts are here, who are the party that's interested in purchasing this property. This location, I do have a map here in just a second. It's at the corner of Weaver Pike and Kent Hook Hill Road. And I will just talk briefly about the rezoning process. So because this property is located within the city's urban growth boundary, but it is outside the city limits, the procedure tonight is the Planning Commission of the City of Bristol Planning Commission will review the rezoning request and then make a recommendation, either positive or negative, that will go to the Sullivan County Commission for a decision. The Sullivan County Commission will hear the recommendation of the Planning Commission, but they aren't bound by the recommendation, and they will vote to either approve or disapprove the rezoning once they have the opportunity to hear it at their meeting. So that's the process tonight. We will forward whatever recommendation comes out of the Planning Commission discussion tonight to the County Commission. So I'll start with a location map and show you the property here that we're going to be discussing. So we're looking at this parcel that's hatched in red here where the laser, can everybody see this laser? Okay, so it's a section of this larger parcel here located at Weaver Pike and Kent Hook Hill. So it's this portion here that has been requested for the rezoning. You can see the surrounding zoning in this area. You have this area in a light green is how it shows up on my screen, but this is an R1. It's Sullivan County R1 zone. You do have a piece of B4, Sullivan County B4 zone here, so a single parcel. And then this larger piece, it's shown here, it's been subdivided a recent time. So there is a subdivision here, but this whole parcel, as shown on this map, is shown as R1A, and this parcel is located within the city limits. So this is the last piece here that's in the city of Bristol. Everything else out in this area is Sullivan County zoning. Is what's showing up here. So that's just to orient where we are for this rezoning request. Here's a chart that shows you both the existing zoning and the existing land use of parcels in the area. So as you scan down the existing zoning classifications that are present in the area, you can see that R1 low density single family residential district zone. That's the Sullivan County zone. You can see there's some A1, which is general agricultural estate residential district in the area to the east. There's that R1A City of Bristol zoning, which is single family residential. And then I think that's the only immediate adjacent zoning classifications. Like you saw on the map, there is that B4 piece that's just a couple parcels down. And then the majority of this area is either vacant and agricultural, or it is developed with single family residential development. Just a quick summary of the differences in the zones here. So again, the R1 zone, which is what the property zone now, allows for single-family detached dwellings. It allows for administrative services, libraries. I won't read the whole list, but you can see their lower intensity uses. The B3 district allows for some of those same uses, single-family detached dwelling, of course, but it also expands to include some business uses, such as self-storage, lodging house, boarding house, automotive parking. It allows some retail, some professional services, restaurants, wholesale sales, and agriculture.
That's the Sullivan County.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Both of those districts listed on the screen are that's the Sullivan County.
Not the city of
zoning
Bristol. Yeah, okay.
Correct. Yeah. So here are just a couple photos of the property. So on the left, you can see the view of the west property line of the parcel, and this is taken from Cant Hook Hill Road. And then on the right, this is a view of the property from the north. So here is an excerpt from the City of Bristol Future Land Use Map. And this is the map we always look at when we look at rezoning requests. So what this map indicates is the future land use designation for these parcels. The yellow shows up in kind of a yellow color, yellow-green on my screen, is going to indicate low-density residential. The purple indicates a medium-density residential. So when we looked at this land use map, the staff analysis was that rezoning the subject property to B3 does not agree with the future land use plan and policy. We also looked through all of the policies that accompany the map and did not feel like any of the guidance from those policies supported the rezoning request in this situation. And we talk about this occasionally with rezoning requests, but we did feel that this was a case where a spot zoning could be a problem for three reasons that are listed in this bulleted list. One, the B3 use would be a classification that's different from the majority of that surrounding area. The second bullet, the rezoning would not be consistent with the future land use plan. And then the third is that the reason for this rezoning request is for the sole benefit of the owner of the property. Public comment, we did receive one call in opposition to this request, but that's the only public feedback that we've had. As far as the staff recommendation goes, the staff recommendation to the Bristol Planning Commission is to send an unfavorable recommendation to the Sullivan County Commission for this request, and it's for those following reasons that we outlined on the previous slide. So, rezoning the subject site does not align with the zoning or the surrounding use of surrounding properties. The B3 zone disagrees with the land use plan. That land use plan projects low density residential use for that area. And then the third, concern that this rezoning would represent a spot zoning. So that is all, those are all the slides that I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions or flip back and go into greater detail on any of the information that provided.
Before anybody asks any questions to the public, again, if you want to make any comments about this, I'd go ahead and dial the number that's on your screen to get in line to do this. Mr. Steele, we're aware of the fact that you are already in line, and we'll get to you in just a minute. Now, Planning Commission, do you have any questions of staff? Nothing?
Sheriff, this type of a zoning, I mean, the recommendation is unfavorable. Is this typically where we've gone with similar situations?
I believe so. I mean, definitely in the recent past, if the request does not align with the future land use map and there is no similar zoning in the area,
Mhm.
where the request is. The recommendation that you'll see come out of Bristol staff is going to be for an unfavorable recommendation.
Thank you.
Is there anybody on the planning commission that wants to address this? If not, I'm going to ask either the Baggetts or Mr. Steele to address the planning commission. Who would like to go?
Mr. Baggett, you want to go first? Or I can, either one.
Mr. Baggett, you'll have to unmute.
Mr. Baggett, hit your unmute button.
Got it.
There we go.
Whichever one wants to
Mr.
go.
Baggett, you want me to comment?
Yes, sir. Why don't you go ahead?
Well, my only comment, Sheriff, is when you and I talked here, it's been several years ago, I remember you showing me a map of Bristol's future plans for rezoning. And if I remember correctly, I mean, it's been several years ago, but you had two pieces of the property that's in the city for future zoning, zoned B3. The area that where Weaver Pike and 394 join, that corner there was future B3. And also right up the road from where this zoning is supposed to be, no more than a few hundred yards, you had a section of that, if I remember correctly, zone B3. Now, if I'm wrong, I apologize, but that was my only comment. Thanks.
Mr. Steele, before you get away, if you do not mind, we need you for the record to identify yourself and the address. We of course realize that because we can see it on our screen, but for the record, if you give us your name and address, please.
Yes, my name is Andrew J. Steele. I live at 559 Blanches View Drive, Bless City, Tennessee, 37618.
Thank you, sir. Now then, Sheriff.
Yes, sir.
Would you like me to? I'm
Yes.
sorry. Okay. So yes, so on the future land use plan, and I wish I had a more zoomed in piece of map here to show you. But so this is an updated map from when Mr. Steele and I spoke a couple years ago. I don't think much has changed in this exact vicinity from that future map we looked at. But there is some commercial land use designation up at the corner of this larger piece. Let me see if I can highlight it here. It would be up in this corner where Weaver Pike and Highway 394 meet. There is, and that exists today, some commercial land use designation up here on this portion. And then once you get on down Weaver Pike down in this corner, there is some what we call now neighborhood commercial land use designation, but it's on further down Weaver Pike just a little bit going down this way. So there are some neighborhood commercial and some commercial up here in this corner. But from the perspective of the land use map, it's solidly residential in this, all in this area. So I think that, I mean, we can go back and check, but I don't believe that there was any commercial designation down in this area.
Where my finger is.
Sheriff, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
That area where the B4 is that city or county?
That's county zoning.
That whole little section right there that's looks like 3 lots. That's still county, right?
Right.
Okay.
But the land directly behind it is city.
Yeah.
This is, yes.
Yeah, the R1A. Interesting. Anything else about that? Mr. Baggett, did you want to address the Planning Commission?
Yes, I do.
Please, if you would, name and address.
Okay, my name is James, or Jim Baggett, and the address is 4973 Weaver Pike. And that's Bluff City. I have a 40-foot motorhome, and when I can't get it on my property. I've got 7 acres up there, but the driveway is too long for me to turn it around. And anyway, I wanted to find a place to put the motorhome. Well, I called all over the surrounding area in Tennessee, and everybody was full. And I finally found a place in Abingdon, Virginia, and they had 2 slots left, and I got one of them. And anyway, that's where I put the motorhome. And then when I got to thinking, well, you know, obviously there's a need for what I want to do. And I'd like to have a place close to my residence so I could better look after it. And anyway, I saw this property for sale, and I called the realtor, and you know, we met with Mr. Steele and all, and signed an agreement that if we got the rezoning, that I would purchase it, and that's about it. So there's a need for what I want to do, and I guess that's about it.
Okay, does anybody in the Planning Commission have any questions or comments for either one of these people? One is the current owner and one is a proposed owner. If not, then what we're going to do is we're going to take a pause while we turn to the public and say, if anybody wants to address the Planning Commission, now is the time to call in. The number is on your screen. Call in. We'll take a short little break here to see if anybody wants to call in and address the Planning Commission. If you do, we'll bring you into the meeting. All right. All right. Thank you, everybody. We did not have any callers, so we will wrap this up. Are there any more questions or comments from the Planning Commission? If not, is there a motion?
I'll move to accept staff's recommendation on this property.
We have a motion to accept staff's recommendation, which is to send an unfavorable recommendation to the County Commission. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it, Kelly.
Thank you, Joel. We have a motion and we have a second. Is there any discussion for the motion that is on the floor? Roll call.
Kelly Graham,
Yes.
Malin Luttrell. Malin,
Unmute.
Sorry, yes.
Mark Webb,
Yes.
Margaret,
Yes.
Jason Boer,
Yes.
Takai Shu,
Yes.
Joel Staten is yes. Scott Gaynor,
Yes.
Kevin Buck.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, we do not rezone. However, we will be sending an unfavorable recommendation to the county commission. Moving on to the next, thank you all for joining us. We appreciate you calling in and joining us.
Right.
The new business concept plan review.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, up for consideration is a concept plan for multifamily development out on Feathers Chapel Road. If Planning Commission will remember previously, this property came to you all as a special use permit, and you all approved a special use permit for this property. Zone B3 for multifamily. With that, I'll let Sheriff give the presentation.
Thank you. So this is the conceptual site plan approval for a multifamily project here on Feathers Chapel. The applicant owner is Mr. Gary Smith, and this is about a little over 5 acres, and it is zoned B3. And we do have Miss Linda Rhodes, I believe, here tonight on Zoom to kind of answer questions and represent the project. So as Tim said, the Planning Commission did review this in the special use permit application capacity back in September, and the special use permit was approved with one condition, and that was for a type A landscape buffer to be required along the entire length of the east and west property lines that are adjacent to residential lots. The reason tonight we're bringing it back to you for the concept plan approval is because it is located in the Highway 394 Plan Development Overlay. So that's the reason it's coming back as a concept plan to you tonight. Working in tandem with the concept plan review, the applicant has also submitted a site plan application. So that's their full construction documents. So we are also, city staff is also working with the applicant on the site plan application to get them through that process as well. So tonight, the Planning Commission request is to review the concept plan application. So here is just a reminder where this site is. So this is Highway 394, Feathers Chapel. So it's the site right here in red. Across Feathers Chapel from the Tri-Cities Golf Club and the self-storage units. The project that was approved for special use permit and the project that's represented tonight, it's 32 residential units. They're separated into 4 different clusters, and each cluster contains 8 units. The approximate square footage is 20,000 square feet. I'll show you the site plan or the concept plan next, but one specific item we do need to discuss is an additional building that's shown on this concept plan that was not shown on the special use site plan. So we'll discuss that in just a second. I'll flip the slide and show it to you. But also as a reminder to everyone, this project as a new construction project will be required to comply with the design standards included in Chapter 4A of the zoning ordinance. So quickly, this is the special use permit site plan that was approved in September. So you'll see here the 32 units, four little sets of buildings, 8 units each. 2 access points off of Feathers Chapel Road, not off of Highway 394. So this is what you all looked at back in September. And then I'll flip to the site plan, concept plan that has been submitted for official approval. The building arrangement remains the same, but what I was referring to in the additional building is you can see coming back off this first access point, they're showing a drive back to a future building that was not on that special use permit plan. And Ms. Rhodes is here, and she explained to me earlier today, but that building is just proposed to store and house equipment, lawnmowers, some of their yard maintenance type items. But that's the purpose of this building here as an additional item for the concept plan. But it's an interesting point, and obviously as much discussion as we've had on these special use site plans as to what is this a difference maker in terms of bringing the special use site plan or special use permit back to the Planning Commission for a revised approval, or is this a very minor change to that special use permit that you all approved that we can continue to move forward with if you all are in the position to approve this site plan concept plan. So this is the plan. I'm sure I'll come back to it, but I'll just run through a couple of the points on the staff report. So ingress, egress, and off-street parking as approved on this special use plan. There are 2 access points here shown along Feathers Chapel Road, so nothing along the Highway 394. Nothing along Highway 394, so there's no concern here for safety or capacity issues. From a parking standpoint, each residential unit requires 1.5 spaces per unit. So this plan far exceeds what is required from the zoning ordinance. So they're required 48 spaces. The drawing provides a total of 92. One thing to point out on refuse areas, there are 2 dumpster locations shown on this plan. In the site plan documents, they do provide an enclosure detail that shows that the enclosure will either be pressure treated lumber or concrete block. Our zoning ordinance does require one of those materials or heavy landscaping to buffer the container. So that's not a problem, but we are concerned, staff is concerned with the location of the dumpster on the left side set of buildings at the left entrance off of Feathers Chapel. So it's right here. The staff recommendation that we'll give to you here at the conclusion is to relocate that dumpster. Staff would recommend something that's out of the setback, better buffered from the public right of way. And there is concern that the current location as it's shown here would result in either tenants stacking to get out and throw the trash away, and or it could be problematic for the trucks that come to pick up the refuse because they'd be required to back into the right of way. So that is a concern that we'll outline in our recommendation to you. Utilities, water service will be provided by the city from a 12-inch line located along Highway 394. Gravity sanitary sewer service will be provided from an 8-inch line located along Feathers Chapel Road. Screening and buffering. When the Planning Commission approved the special use site plan, they did put a condition in there for the type A landscape buffer to be required along the residential property, so on either side. On the landscape plan they submitted along with the site plan application, they do not note that it's a type A buffer, but note that they will use existing natural buffer to screen the project. So staff will continue to work with them on that. We don't have a problem for existing trees to be utilized in satisfying the buffer requirement, but we need some additional information to verify that there's enough out there to satisfy this requirement. So staff will continue to work with them to make sure that all revisions on that landscape plan meet the Planning Commission condition on the special use site plan. The lighting and signage, there is no lighting or signage shown on the plan right now. Should there be anything added in the future, we will make sure that it meets both city code and zoning ordinance requirements for exterior lighting and signage. From setbacks, maximum lot coverage and density, the project does meet the setbacks, maximum lot coverage and density. So as shown, the proposed buildings meet the setback requirements, but staff would recommend that that dumpster be relocated from the setback area, which we outlined just a few minutes ago. With that, the staff recommendation to the Planning Commission on this request tonight is for the approval of the conceptual plan with the following conditions. The first is that type A landscape buffer or equivalent natural buffer is required along the entire length of the east and west property lines adjacent to residential lots. And then the second item is that the dumpster proposed along Feathers Chapel Road must be relocated. And then just as one aside, we would just like to have Planning Commission's input on that future building that's shown on the concept plan, just to make sure that that's not a problem or concern for the commission. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Before we get to Planning Commission asking questions, let me ask this as kind of a legal question. Because that future building was not on the special use permit, if we approve the site plan, does that in effect bring that building into compliance with the special use permit?
Sheriff, do you want to answer or should I answer?
Well, I was going to start with, I'll defer to Danielle, but I guess I could.
No, I was just going to say,
we were kind of thinking about it, but
I think if you all are clear that that you think that building needs to have a special use permit, then you could approve the concept plan with the exception of that building, or you could say you've got to remove that building from the concept plan. If that makes sense. If you intend to say it's okay for you to have that building, you don't need to come back and do another special use permit, then that's what will happen. But if that is not your intent, be very clear about that.
Okay, we will discuss that. Okay, Planning Commission, any questions, thoughts, comments?
And Mr. Chairman, we do have Ms. Rhodes here representing the public, if you have questions for her.
All right.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, I will start by saying that when we approved the special use permit, adjacent property owner wasn't in opposition to the special use permit, but did have concerns pertaining to the buffer between his property and the property in question. And I concur with staff's recommendation. I'm not familiar directly with what is there naturally, but I would venture a guess that it is not an evergreen type coverage or 12-month out of the year coverage. And my vote for the special use permit was contingent upon there being something similar to that, a fence or something that would provide year-round coverage dense enough to protect his interest and his property values. And I also concur with the location of the trash can. I will note that, in my opinion, and it's the owner's property, and my understanding is they're going to rent it, but those things, it's been a long time since I've lived in multifamily dwelling, but I can remember, and I'm familiar from business perspective, from commercial property, they're very noisy, both when people are dropping off garbage and when the garbage is being picked up by the service that removes it. And so having it close as it is indicated in the site plan to the dwellings is a concern, but more of a concern to me, in addition to the concerns outlined by staff of the one location, is also the adjacent and close to the adjoining property owner and the noise that it would impact him. So I would like to see, in my opinion, and the garbage, the refuse collection area should be closer to where the proposed building is identified in the site plan, and away from the adjacent property owner. But those are my two concerns. And my chief concern is that screening and the density that would be required. And I'm not of the opinion that the natural habitat that is there is sufficient.
Jason, let me ask you this, the staff's recommendation, if we accept staff's recommendation, does that answer all of your objections to your satisfaction?
Well, I mean, according to the staff's recommendation, they've indicated that perhaps the existing landscaping is sufficient. My question would be to Sheriff or Tim, density doesn't have to be 12-month density. or does it? So what I'm saying is a fence or some type of evergreen tree that would provide a 12-month coverage.
I think our take on it is just that on the landscape plan that they submitted, which is included in your packet, there's not enough information there to satisfy that what's existing would match that buffer requirement. Now, if there are some trees in there that they can utilize in meeting the type A requirement, then the existing trees can be utilized. I guess we're not saying you have to mow it all out and replace. You can use some of the existing trees to meet that type A buffer requirement. But at a minimum, they would have to have something that met the type A buffer requirement. And right now on that landscape plan, there's not enough information to really verify that. So that's where I guess the thought is we would continue working with them. We've got some other landscaping notes that need to be corrected on the landscape plan as we work through the site plan application process with them. But that's something we would continue to work with them on. It has to meet the type A requirement.
My question is, if Planning Commission agrees with Jason, will the staff's recommendation cover his thoughts and concerns?
I think that, I guess the way that it was, I understand what he's saying, and I think that that's the way that that recommendation was tailored to capture that sentiment, is that it absolutely has to meet the minimum of the type A landscape buffer.
And the landscape, the trees have to be evergreens. They can't be, so they do have to be evergreens in the type A buffer. So if there's any existing out there, it would have to be an evergreen.
Yeah.
To qualify.
And
Does that answer that question, Jason?
Yes, I mean, yeah, that's my concern is protecting that adjacent property owner. He didn't oppose, and the reason he didn't oppose was because of light noise concerns. And I just would note that if there's an alternative selection for the refuse, that it be part of the consideration be the noise and the proximity to his property when that alternate location is identified. In addition to the other concerns that staff has outlined as far as being right at the main entrance to the development. But to answer your question, Mr. Chairman, knowing more information and getting the response from staff at Evergreen and that the existing foliage agriculture there, the landscape has to meet some type of evergreen and density, that satisfies that concern. And then also just my notes to staff that the refuse be also considered if there's an alternate location and be considered the noise on the adjacent property. That would satisfy my concerns.
That's what I was trying to find out. Assuming there is a motion to accept staff's recommendation, you're comfortable with the way it's worded and you don't feel like it needs to be reworded?
No, sir. I'm in agreement.
Okay. Other thoughts or comments?
So would we see another drawing with these changes as proposed? Dumpster relocation, showing the trees and type trees or whatever?
If that's what the Planning Commission would desire, certainly we could bring it back for approval showing that information. Or if you accept staff's recommendation, then part of the site plan, we would ensure that those are met on the site plan as part of the site plan comments without you all seeing an additional drawing. But so I guess the choice is, if you're comfortable with the staff recommendation, if you want to approve it that way, we'll ensure that gets put on the final site plan that's approved. If you want to see it before we approve the site plan and bring it back and you all approve the revised concept plan, you all could vote that way also.
Do you have any ideas where you might wish those dumpsters be relocated?
That would be a question for Ms. Rhodes if they've spoken about the proposed new location yet.
Linda, if you don't mind, address the planning commission and give us your name and address, please, for the record.
Okay, I'm Linda Rhodes. I live at 312 Timberlane Road in Bristol, 37620. So Mr. Smith and I did discuss that, and he said, I'll move them wherever they want me to move them. So he's willing to do whatever y'all say. He isn't married to the idea of having the dumpsters there at the entrance. The other thing I wanted to mention was the neighbor who expressed concern about the noise, the possibility that that noise could interfere with these peace, lives on the right-hand side of that lot. Just so you know where he is.
All right, are there any other questions for Linda while we'll have her up right now? Are there any other?
Just one more quick question on the future building. It looks like it's going to be potentially a pretty substantial size building. And I guess the question would be, do we know the types of materials it's been thought about or is it just going to be a metal building or what?
Well, Gary said he wanted it to fit in with the other buildings. And he told me that he wanted to put mowers and lawn equipment there. He said, instead of taking it back and forth every week, it'd be nice to have a place just to leave those things.
And
so it would just be used for this property and not used as another or a mowing business coming in and out or taking.
Right. It would be just for this property.
Okay.
Lawn maintenance.
And Mayor Luttrell, it would have to meet our design standards for materials. And
okay. Thanks.
I have a question for Sheriff. So the gentleman that appeared before us that had the concern about the noise, he resides on the right-hand side of this parcel from Feathers Chapel Road, but is there also a dwelling on the left as well?
There is.
A single-family dwelling? Okay.
yes.
So based on that, I mean, I would propose that garbage dumpsters not be anywhere near the two adjoining property lines on either side. I mean, when they come in and pick those things up and they dump them, it is not quiet. And they can come in the early hours of the morning or the late hours of the evening or in the middle of the day. And it all depends on who you are and where you live. So there's on the site plan, there's a stormwater management area. And behind that, there's an open area right in the middle between the two units or the two multifamily units. So somewhere in that proximity would be, to me, more considerate of the adjoining property owners than somewhere on the periphery of the property.
Well, it has
And
to
as far as the building is concerned, my only concern would be, would this be for more than just lawnmowers and equipment for this property, or would it be a storage area beyond the use for this property? And if we approve it being on the map, are we saying yes to, a riding lawnmower, a weed eater, and a push mower, or are we saying more than that?
If they were a lawn service, they could put one on here by right without your all's approval other than the building. So they could do that. They would have to meet parking requirements for employees and things, but they could do that by right currently on this property. It wouldn't affect the special use permit in any way.
To that same end, Mr. Chairman, actually for Sheriff, are storage buildings allowed by right in the B3?
Storage buildings are a special use permit in the B3.
For
I mean,
rental, for rental storage, mini warehouses.
right, like what is across the street there would be a special use permit.
So would so would a on-site owner use storage building be consistent with B3 zoning?
Yeah.
It would be consistent.
Taking that
Yeah, this is-
concept a step further, what if they wanted to enlarge that building or another building back there for the personal storage of the people that live there, or garages for people that live there? Is that allowed by right, or would that require a special use permit?
Well, that would be part of the special use permit originally, if that was wanted to go in there. It's not a use by right by itself. And now the way the B3 is written, currently the new regs that were just passed and go into effect the 19th, the multifamily would not be a special use permit anymore. It would be by right. So based on that, as of the 19th, you could do multifamily with storage for those people on that property that use that property, garage, whatever, parking garage, parking space, covered parking. That would all be by right come March 19th, based on the new regulations passed by City Council. But they could not, the mini warehouses where they would rent them to people that weren't on that property, that's where it would come into that special use permit process through the mini warehouse. It would be no different as if it were attached to the building or separate on that property, if it was only for the use of the people on that property. Does that make sense?
I don't see any size of that building.
Yeah.
That thing could be huge, couldn't it? I mean, I don't see any dimensions on that building. And are we approving an open concept for that building, or will it be limited to a specific size?
You could limit it to a specific size. I can't zoom in on this drawing, but the units, Sheriff, what's the dimension of the units, each unit?
Each unit is 26 by 24.
So it looks like about 2 units in size. So about
you'd hold it-
1,200 square feet, it looks like
So
approximately.
you would hold it to the scale then, not to a written size?
Probably on the site plan. I don't know if they showed a square footage on the site plan itself. Sheriff, do you remember?
I don't.
But, it's on the site plan as that, so we'd hold it to that size by scaling it. If we would, actually on the site plan, we would get them to show, one of the comments will be show the square footage.
Okay.
So, but it
Yeah,
appears
that's
approximately
my,
1,200 square feet, somewhere in that neighborhood,
yeah,
1,300.
that,
It doesn't look like we
Well,
know
that
what
was
we're
my-
approving.
If you look at the next page on the site plan that was given to us, that building's going to be boxed in a little bit by the topo. The topo lines look like it starts going uphill. And so that'll box it in a little bit right there.
Right.
Mhm.
Mr. Chairman, based on these questions and concerns and the option to bring this back, I don't want to impede the development of this property any, but this is a special use permit. There were concerns from adjoining property owners. And based on that, I would like to see that. I'm not saying I would oppose approval, but my preference would be that we see these adjustments in the site plan in order to protect those adjoining property owners.
Mr. Beavers, is there a way to, assuming the rest of Planning Commission wants to go with that, is there a way to two-step this, give an approval tonight so that they know they can go forward? However, final approval happens next month after we see revised site plans, or do we wait?
Well, I mean, I think, and I'll ask Danielle, but I think we need approval of the concept plan before we approve a site plan. So if if you want to have those changes made, certainly we would hold off on final approval of a site plan until the concept plan was officially approved.
I think if you guys have questions about the concept plan and you want to see changes, then I would not approve it tonight, because what you're risking is that you say, okay, we're giving you conditional approval tonight, and then next month, if you're not happy with it, you have to walk that back. And so I think the appropriate thing to do, if that's where you are, is to postpone for action on this until next month's meeting and ask for that additional information that you're asking for.
Again, there's no motion on the
Right.
floor right now. However, I anticipate one. Mr. Brewer, where would you be going with it?
I would make a motion that we revisit this issue next month with the adjustments that I've indicated and other members of the Planning Commission have suggested as well.
That was a motion.
Yes,
Well,
sir.
I mean, I before we make them, well, okay, I guess you made a motion. All right.
Doesn't have to be approved, but we're looking for a second. Without a
I'll
second.
second it, Kelly.
Okay, then we have a motion and a second. We're now open for discussion on the motion that Jason made. Discussion.
Do we need to make a list of what we want to see corrected, or does staff kind of get the feel of what we want to see corrected?
Well, we will regurgitate what you said, but we certainly want to make sure it's clear at the end before you vote.
So the other question I have is there anything we can do with our motion that allows staff to follow up, and then we don't need to have it back again? So that trusting staff, to giving them enough to, why are you laughing, Kevin?
It's because that's the opposite of what the motion is.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
But we're discussing. So, and I would prefer not to have it back again. So that's what I'm asking, is whether we could be, is that possible? I certainly don't want to vote no to the only motion that's on the, I do think changes need to be made, but whether we can shortcut to give directives to staff enough that is specific enough that they know what they're going to be looking at for approval from their end. That's what I'm asking.
I think what Margaret is asking, saying, thinking, is there a way to amend the motion that it included everything that we were looking for?
Well, the other is if people wanted to take back the motion and have a different motion. So anyway, whatever would be easiest if there's ways to do that. Anyway.
And I think you have and certainly can discuss, but obviously you've got to vote the motion on the floor up or down. Then make a new motion or revise it. You can amend that motion or revise it or vote it up and down, one of the two.
Yes, Margaret, you can, if you move to amend the motion to say exactly what you want it to say and someone else seconds it, then Planning Commission would vote on that amendment. And then assuming your amendment passes, you would vote on the amended main motion. I'll leave it to you guys whether it's more confusing to follow that process or to have a quick vote on the main motion on the floor.
We just need to hear what other planning commissioners are thinking to know whether we ought to start fresh, or we ought to take what we've got and just specify it and see it again next month. Either way.
Let me
Yeah,
ask,
as the
I would
originator of
hate,
the motion, let me just say that type A buffering, I get that. I'm satisfied. Staff can determine what's type A buffering is applicable for this property and if the existing buffering meets that requirement. Moving the trash cans specifically from the perimeter to somewhere more central to the property. Seeing that on a site plan, I don't have to see that. But then the other concern that I have after listening to the discussion from other members is with no sizing for that building, that particular component is probably the most problematic for me. So if someone, and if it would be appropriate for me to amend my own motion, and it's been a while since I've looked at that deep into Robert's Rules of Order, parliamentary procedure, but I would be willing to approve the site plan based upon the identification of the location of the refuse collection bins and sizing of that building behind the one unit.
Jason, in lieu of amending your motion, why don't you and the seconder withdraw it, and then we'll start over?
So my question would be, can I do that once, my understanding is once a motion is made, it's a property of the body, is that, or it's owned by the body, Danielle? Can I rescind my motion?
If you'll give me one moment, I apologize. This is one of those things that doesn't come out very often.
What's the book?
You are exactly right.
Okay, while you're researching that, I've got a question on the site plan. On lighting, there is no lighting. That kind of concerns me as far as safety, as far as people pulling in there and there's no lighting. Is that something that's just not required to be on there? Or should we have a discussion about whether or not we should require internal lighting for safety purposes?
There is not an ordinance that requires somebody to put lighting on their property. If they do put lighting on their property, they cannot let, against residential properties at the property line, there can only be 0.5 foot candles of light measured at the property line, so adjacent to residential properties. At right-of-way lines along the roads, there can only be 2 foot candles. So that's hard written into the zoning ordinance, but there is not a requirement in the zoning ordinance that people have to provide external lighting to their property.
However, if we wanted it, could we require it? Or are we precluded from doing that because of what you just quoted?
That would, Danielle, you can help me here, but it doesn't, there isn't any provision in any of our ordinances for that I know of off the top of my head that says that we can require people to light their property. Typically, we're worried about too much light on their property, not any light. And there are street lights along Feathers Chapel Road, so the entrances itself would be lit. But I can't speak, and that's a deep question that Danielle will have to weigh into. As she reading Robert's rules, she'll have to think about lighting.
Well, I found an answer on the withdrawal question. So that's, unfortunately, withdrawing is something that has to be, you have to get leave of the assembly, which is the entire membership, or I would think a majority of the membership in order to withdraw. So Jason, you could ask to withdraw, and if the majority voted to let you withdraw the motion, then you could withdraw it. In terms of the,
yeah, that's a deep one on the lighting.
now the lighting, and I think I agree with Mr. Beavers that where we don't actually have anything that says you have to have minimum lighting, as far as I know. We go in the opposite direction. So I think that Planning Commission might be going outside their boundaries if they were going to try to require that.
So, Mr. Chairman, if you would ask the question of the body, if there was no objection to the rescission of the motion, I would concur with that without having to go through a roll call vote without objection.
In lieu of a roll
And I would be
call
prepared to
vote,
make an,
okay, in lieu of a roll call vote, is there anybody objects to the maker of the motion removing his emotion? Hearing none, we'll consider it removed. Now then, are we ready for a motion, or do we still want to discuss some more?
Yeah, I'd just like to throw my 2 cents in before you make a motion. Just, yeah, I mean, I think that the changes that you're seeking are pretty basic. It's stuff that staff deals with every day. You know, I think moving that dumpster somewhere in the middle of the property is probably not going to be realistic for the people that live there. But everything that was said about that future building, I would prefer a motion where that is not included in it, for the simple fact that there's no definition to it. It could be huge, it could be small, you know. I mean, we heard, well, you just want to put a lawnmower in there, but you're talking, you know, a 50-foot long building that's a little bit bigger than a mower. So you know, I'm never a fan of approving open-ended things. You know, if it had size, then I would approve it. But just
Scott,
to
I assume we could limit the size. We could say up to X amount, so that.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't want to get in the business of telling the landowner what to do. So, I mean, you know, I mean, if they wanted a certain size, then they can ask for it, you know, if there's a reason they want it. And I mean, I just would rather I'd rather vote on what the landowner's asking and just be done with that. But the buffering and the movement of the dumpster, staff can handle that. I don't have a problem with that.
Well, I'll just add to that. I would not have a problem with, I don't know what that size would be, but saying up to, and then let staff work with the owner. And that helps the owner to not have to come back. So anyway, and it sounds like the owner, Linda's been pretty agreeable. So if it were a reasonable number for us, then anyway. So
yeah, I mean, honestly, if somebody made a motion and they limited it, I wouldn't vote no. I mean, that's not a deal breaker for me. It's just personal.
What's the square footage of 2 units? Do it by square footage.
I could make a suggestion. If you all are comfortable with as shown on the concept plan, flip back, Sheriff, to the concept plan.
To scale.
We can scale it, and you know, if it's no larger than what's shown on the concept plan, if you're comfortable with that, then we can scale that because it is a scaled drawing.
Mm-hmm.
And can limit it to what's shown, the size shown on the concept plan. If that's what if you're comfortable with that.
One question, what about location? Will it be there on that spot, or will they move it, or?
Well, that's the concept plan. It will be there on that spot.
Okay.
Yeah. It'll be approval of the concept plan will lock it into that spot and that size.
well, if the approval of the concept plan locks that building into that spot, what about I mean, we still don't know where those containers are going.
If you want to, you could make them, you know, part of your approval could be that they need to be between the 2 different sets of units.
I don't think that's practical. People aren't going to carry their garbage all the way. I think if anything, it needs to be at the far end, which is longer for a truck to go. But anyway, but somewhere where it's close enough for people to take we don't know what that looks like in between that storm. It may be a big ditch and you can't walk across it. And anyway, that's just not practical.
Yeah, you're asking the people on the left to go all the way around the other building. I think what you're going to end up seeing is it's going to be at the end of the driveway.
Right.
And if you want it at the end of the driveway, if you want it to the east side, is that I mean, be that specific with, if you want to get that specific with it.
I
If you
think
say at the end of the driveway on the
I,
east,
I would be fine with where the right unit is fine with me. The left set of units, if it was at the end of the driveway on the right side,
the
that
east
would be
side.
suitable.
Okay,
East side.
You've
then I
got,
would suggest making your motion bullet pointed out that way if that's what y'all choose to do.
what concerns me at the end of the driveway is that truck can pull in there real nice, but he's got to back out of there.
Yeah.
no,
Unless
he
there's
might
a
have to back
turnaround or
in.
something.
I think he's
Yeah,
gonna
they
have to
may
do that
just
either. He's gonna have to do that either way, I think, unless that's is that a 24-foot wide driveway, Tim, or?
It's, it looks like it says 24,
24.
Yeah.
but they could provide a T or something for him to back into at the end of the driveway.
Right.
Or they may just extend the driveway. I mean, the whole
Exactly.
point is to get the dumpster out of the front setback. So if you move it, looks like 10 feet. Just move everything north 10 feet.
So if a motion were to be made, indicating where the dumpster would be on the left unit, specifically the east side of the end of the drive into the units, and that the other staff concerns and type A buffering being confirmed by staff, and that the additional building in the back be to scale as it's indicated on the plan. Would that be something that everybody, is that where we're going?
I would rather say on that one dumpster, just say on the right-hand side of the units, because I imagine they're just going to move everything 10 feet. You know, I mean, but having a truck back up, 200 feet is a heck of a lot more than, pulling in, grabbing a dumpster and then backing up to 50 feet. So, I wouldn't be as specific to say exactly. I'd just say on the right side and let the owner decide whether he wants it at the end or at the front.
I think it's gonna be, I have no idea what the truck needs to do dumpsters, but I would think that could be difficult at the front, period.
Well, one of the main concern of staff from a traffic standpoint is backing out into the public road. So it would have to make a provision for the truck to exit without backing out.
Which has to be true no matter which location. What about in the same true for the other one?
They have opportunity there to back into the access aisle better when they pick that up, since it's on the curve.
Okay.
You guys don't mind, let's break protocol just a little bit. Linda, you've listened to the discussion. Is there anything you want to throw in there?
No, from time to time as they were talking, I thought of things, but now I can think of nothing. I will say on the lot to the left, the residence, the house is on the far end away from this location. That's probably helpful as far as concern about noise for the neighbor.
I guess I have some aesthetic concern. Just putting your garbage dump at the front of your building is anyway.
It's convenient though. As you're leaving, you can drop your garbage there.
Yep.
And the other thing, do y'all remember when we were here before? I think I heard someone talk about maybe extending some of the things beyond what we see. And we've encountered a rock situation here on these lots. So going any further back may present another whole challenge.
Okay. Is there any other discussion, either questions for Linda or questions for staff? If not, or is somebody ready to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, can I just,
Please.
before somebody makes a motion, please if you're going to make it like the items we discussed, can I just bullet point those out again real quick to make sure everybody's comfortable with what you all have discussed, at least what we've heard? Is one, to ensure there's a type A buffering along the residential property lines on the east side and west side of the properties. That the future building, as shown to scale, that is what is getting approved. And then on the dumpster, that it be some people, but what I've heard the most is at the end of the driveway on the right hand or east side, right side or east side, which would be the east. I'd prefer it say the east side because we have an arrow there, and there would be no ambiguity for that. And also that the truck must not back out into the public right of way when collecting trash. When exiting the property, cannot back out into the public street. That would be my 4 bullets that I think I understand.
Mr. Chairman, I am not making a motion, but I am prepared to make a motion to concur with everything that Tim Beavers just said.
We will consider that a motion. Is there-
Second.
And we have a second.
Who seconded it?
Malin.
Malin, thank you, sir.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the current motion?
I would just assume that for Linda, Tim, Sheriff, whatever, if for whatever reason, rocks or whatever, things have to differ significantly, then it would come back to us for approval. So.
It would have to meet the motion, and if it was different, it would have to come back to you, yes.
Correct. Thanks.
Any more discussion? Roll call.
Hey, Kelly Graham,
Yes.
Malin Luttrell,
Yes.
Mark Webb,
Yes.
Margaret Firerobin,
Yes.
Jason Boer,
Yes.
Takai Shu,
Yes.
Joel Staton is yes. Scott Gaynor,
Yes.
Kevin Buck.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was real good discussion. Next item, Linda, thank you for joining us. We appreciate that. Next item up, new business C subdivision replat.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, up for consideration is a 3-lot subdivision plat. And this plat is out in the Fox Meadows subdivision, and it's on Thistle Drive. And as you've seen the plat, and Sheriff will give you the presentation here in a second, and it's basically moving 2 lot lines, 2 internal lot lines to the 3 properties to allow for some flexibility with how some encroachments were made on an existing home there. So with that, I'll let Ms. Young give the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Beavers. So this preliminary and final plat request involves the re-subdivision of the 3 lots located at 225, 229, and 233 Thistle Drive. And this is in the Fox Meadows subdivision. The total acreage here is 1.43 acres, and this is zoned R2. Now I'll just show you, this is kind of a zoomed in view of the plat. So here are the 3 lots here in question. And as Tim said, this is just adjusting these internal lot lines here. You can kind of see the old division line here. So they're scooting it over to where this driveway is on this property here. And then adjusting this one over just a bit here. So here's the old dashed division line, and then the new proposed property line. So this is a fairly minor change here, but it does involve 3 lots, which is the definition of a major subdivision. That's the reason to bring it to the Planning Commission for approval tonight. So I'll just go quickly through the analysis that staff went through. This is, has been reviewed for conformance with the subdivision regulations. We don't anticipate there to be any needed additional corrections. From an ingress egress perspective, these 3 lots do have access on the Thistle Drive. The existing road network is adequate and can accommodate these lots. Water, sewer, and electricity are available to the proposed subdivision. Lot size and density, all the information here is correct and adequate. It meets those R2 requirements. So the zoning ordinance is satisfied with this plat. And then from the plat format perspective, all the information that's required by our subdivision regulations is here, and it's adequate. And all the regulations of the subregs have been met. So the staff recommendation tonight on this plat is that since the preliminary and final plat meets all the requirements of the subdivision regulations, the staff does recommend that the Planning Commission grant preliminary and final approval of the replat of lots 107, 127, and 128 for the Phase 3 of Fox Meadows subdivision.
I'll motion to approve.
Okay.
We have a motion. Dr. Webb, you made the second?
Correct.
All right, there's a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion? Hearing, seeing none, roll call.
Kelly Graham,
Yes.
Malin Luttrell,
Yes.
Mark Webb,
Yes.
Margaret Firerobin,
Yes.
Jason Boer,
Yes.
Takai Shu,
Yes.
Joel Staton is yes. Scott Gaynor,
Yes.
Kevin Buck.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Other matters, city council update.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, at their city council's March 2nd meeting, they passed on second reading and held a public hearing for the B3 text amendment, which allowed flexibility in residential developments in the B3 zones. That, as I mentioned previously, will go into effect March 19th. Also, they passed the special use permit text amendment on first reading, and the public hearing and second reading will be at the April 6th city council meeting. They also passed the rezoning to B3 for 121 Bluff City Highway. The public hearing and second reading will be at the April 6th council meeting. They also passed on first reading the Willow Street right-of-way abandonment. Second reading, there is no public hearing required for that. Will be at the April 6th city council meeting. Also, they passed a resolution authorizing the public hearings for the annexation on Weaver Pike. The public hearing for the annexation and the public hearing for the plan of services will be at the April 6th city council meeting, followed by resolutions to adopt the annexation and plan of services, separate resolutions at that meeting. If passed, at the resolutions passed, there will be first reading to assign a zoning of R1A to that property. And all that will occur at the April 6th city council meeting. That's all from city council updates.
Sounds like we've been keeping them busy.
We try.
Is there anything that's been in city council workshops that's still pending before it goes to any city council meetings?
No, sir. We have no actionable items coming up for city council from planning commission, either workshop or on their agenda other than those previously mentioned.
Very good. All right, we'll move to discussion on adaptive reuse.
And yes, up forward to continue the discussion. Sheriff will give you a talk about it here, but is adaptive reuse of residential properties or commercial properties in residential zones, and she'll run through it. And then I have GIS, our Geographic Information System, that I will share on my screen with a map showing residential zones and the churches and schools in those zones, so y'all can get a visual of what we're talking about. So with that, Sheriff, if you want to proceed.
Thank you. Everybody can take a deep breath because these are I think both discussion items are kind of visual tonight. So we'll have a lot of pictures and maps to look at rather than just code language type stuff. So I'm just going to start with a couple of pictures. These are the pictures we kind of always look at with the school on Broad Street, the kind of garage building on East Cedar Street, and then that's on the top right, the garage building, and then the old kind of commercial business on just on Anderson Street on the bottom right. But we went out and kind of have been doing more field work on this topic now that we talked some with you past couple months. And when we discussed this at the last meeting, your all's directive was to start really looking at the schools and churches, which is what we've mapped for you tonight to start taking a look at. We're still doing some field research on some of those little commercial properties. They're a little bit harder to map from data, but we're still tracking those down. But we just kind of went out, Heather Moore actually went out one day last week in the afternoon and took a picture of just some of the churches that are either for sale or we know are now vacant. And so just in that Windsor, Anderson, Broad Street area, there's 3 church buildings that are no longer utilized for churches. And those will show up on the map. Tim will go through in just a second, but just kind of wanted to put the name with the face of some of these churches that are located out in these residential areas. The Planning Commission also asked us to look for additional cities that are doing this type of stuff. So we had looked at Knoxville and Johnson City and provided kind of what they do in terms of adaptive reuse projects during the last couple meetings. But here are just another couple to throw at you. And we looked at cities that were kind of smaller, mid-size, again, not going to like New York City to look at what they're doing, but looking at communities that are more comparable to us. So we just looked through ordinances there's one in Ohio, one in Michigan, and then one in Jupiter, Florida. And, there's interesting little pieces to each one of them, but they're fairly similar to what Knoxville and Johnson City do as far as taking non-residential buildings in residential districts and putting them through what equates to a bit of our special use permit process to allow them to be reused or converted into uses that make sense for probably the size of the building. So these are just a few of the ones we looked at, and then there's a few photos here. There's the top right. This is a church in a residential district that was converted into office space for an at-home health company, and this is in Ohio. And then on the bottom, there's a former auto garage that was converted into a retail and restaurant space, and this is in Florida. And it also has some outdoor dining capacity there as well. So we are looking through these, and then in your packet, you do have the excerpts of the ordinances themselves to look through, but we found them, in line or very similar to Knoxville or Johnson City. So here's just a quick summary again of the questions we've been trying to answer. So if you all like this adaptive reuse direction, which residential districts are appropriate. Maybe it's not appropriate to do it across the board in residential districts. Maybe it's appropriate to do it in certain ones, or maybe the older areas of town where maybe you do have these like historic or neighborhood anchor type businesses or churches or schools that have been located as a neighborhood anchor but are no longer used. So also the question of what types of uses are appropriate. So here as the second bullet is just a list of some of those that have been considered in other communities. Once we kind of if we can get to the point of answering those questions, we can look at some of the more specific questions about site limitations. How do we handle parking, lighting, outdoor noise, and restrictions on hours of operation? And then should this only be in existing buildings, or would you consider some new construction? And then if new construction is allowed, should design standards apply? But the real discussion tonight we'd like to look at with you is to show you that map that you all asked for, where we talked about how we would give you an inventory of some of the existing buildings that are out there and look at them on a map. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and give it to Tim. We've created a GIS map that shows churches and schools in residential areas. So we'll just kind of take a little tour around the city, just looking at how many of those are out there.
And one thing staff would suggest on if we go down this route, if y'all want to go down this route, is we would always make the suggestion that any adaptive reuse be via special use permit, something that you all would have to weigh in on and review would be our suggestion. But I'm going to share my GIS and welcome to the wonderful world of GIS in the city here. Can y'all see that well? And I can move around and zoom in. Y'all see that? Somebody, anybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so and I'll blow it in some here to make it a little bit larger for you. Pull it in, and it might refresh a little slow, but if you can notice, let me pull it over here a little bit so I can see it. And I'll pull a zoning. So on the up here, we have what I've tried to see, and I hope y'all can see this, and going out to the east side of town, we'll start over there in the east side, but we do have a few churches. Can y'all see the little church symbol, the black, and then we have a red that actually spells out the school symbol. I don't know, can y'all see the hand on your screen?
Yes.
Okay, so out in the east end of town, and what you'll notice is consistent with this is most of the churches or schools are in residential zone. The pink color here is R1A. The yellow color is R3, multifamily. The green color is R2. The blue color here, this is R4, the darker blue. The lighter blue, sky blue, is R1B zone. So you can sort of see that over on the side, under zoning, the graphics for those. But these are not all the churches for sale. Don't anybody get that might be watching it start calling in and worry about this. These are just the churches we have identified in the city, just to get an idea that what potentially could be out there. So on the east end, you can see some out on Old Jonesboro one. There's one there, and up toward Millwood Road, Grub Lane in between, there's a church over there. Moving on down King College Road, you can see a couple pop in there around Edgefield. Actually, one of those churches that are showing up, this one right here, it's not in a residential zone. So the white, you see white, that's some zone other than residential. And if I hover over that, it will show me what zone that is, like B1B. But that's the church, the special use permit that y'all looked at recently and approved for the child counseling center out on King College Road. But looking on down through here, our central district, here's Fairmount Elementary, Fairmount area. You have some over here in what Willie Boone area, North Paperville, you know, Maryland, Carolina, King University, you can see there. That's First Presbyterian Church right here up at Spruce in Florida. Like I said, you can just start seeing when you get closer to town, they're more dense. But once again, I think as we pan across here in town, you can see most of them, even in toward the central part of the city, are in residentially zoned areas, be it RE is the orange area here. You're seeing this is the Anderson, Windsor area. Going down the parkway, you see the Tennessee High School, and you know, you can see the names of the street. I don't know why I'm telling you the names of streets when you can see them there, but you can just see as you're closer into town, you get more dense church coverage. As you get out toward the newer parts of town or newer subdivisions, you will lose some of that coverage. But in general, what the intent would be is to show you that most of them are in residentially zoned areas. Of course, along the parkway, you know, you have churches that aren't, but even in some of those, here's a church out in Marlin Hills on Greenfield. Then you have Blue Bonnet, you know, out in Sunnybrook. That's in a R1A zone. Even the church with the big cross on the parkway, part of that property is zoned R1A. So, like I said, you'll just see the common theme is most of them, except if you're along the major corridors, are in the residentially zoned areas. And I will blow this out and it will get way too small probably for y'all to see very much resolution to try to show you a overall picture of the churches inside the corporate limits. So, like I said, and I hope y'all can see that fairly well, and I can turn the street names off just so you don't gunk it up with that. But there are a lot of churches, and I can turn the schools off here for you. Just churches by themselves, there are a lot of them, and once again, the majority of them are in the residential areas. Y'all have a specific area you want me to zoom into or talk about or show you, I can. You can pull up whatever you want on GIS here. It's a luxury here for y'all. Any questions or anything you want me to zoom in on this map, and then we'll share with you. If not, I can stop sharing, and Sheriff, you can put that last slide back up. All right, Sheriff, I'm going to stop sharing, and you can put that share yours back on that slide.
Okay.
So with that, Mr. Chairman or Sheriff, could, you know, do y'all any thoughts on this list and any other thoughts that haven't talked about or things you want to continue discussing on it? How y'all feel about it? More information y'all want? You want us to craft some sort of real vague draft regulation looking at it to talk about? Just trying to get some feedback.
So putting that into other words or whatever, first off, we have to say whether we're interested in pursuing more. Yes, we like it. The next is we should have some kind of guidelines or some kind of standards for how we decide. Beyond that, I mean, there are so many different uses and so many different types of spaces. It's how can we have those guidelines so that it's not arbitrary or whatever, but that we then have a whole lot of control over a specific site, because a neighborhood that's one way might be great, a neighborhood that's another way, particularly with the size of lot, with the character anyway. So is that correct? And is that possible that we can actually achieve that?
We can, I think for the direction we would have, one, do you want us to pursue this? That's obviously the biggest question, but trying to maybe tonight get some feedback on some uses you may be comfortable with. Let's just, in the R1A being your probably most restrictive zone, you know, because that's your single family residential, is there some guidance, like, do we have any hard feelings about having an art gallery there or a library or something in those type uses? Or, you know, you may not want restaurant and food service in R1A. I mean, just trying to at least get a little bit of guidance on maybe start with that zone. Because as you go to your R2s, maybe R1A and R2, because R2 is similar, it's just duplex zone. But if there's something offensive in those zones, and then you get in your multifamily zones, which probably allows for more flexibility in those zones for adaptive reuse. And RE,
Tim?
RE is similar to your R1A, that's your single family established residential zones. Just, do y'all have something that's really offensive in some of those lower density R1A, R2, RE zones that you wouldn't like to see or talk about, be it meeting spaces, food services, or things like that?
So Tim, I agree with what Margaret has said. My question is, based on I'm inclined to not eliminate any zone from consideration, but is it possible for us? And I'm also inclined not to support new structures, or at least limit new structure to adding on to or renovating existing structure. But is there a possibility, if we approve something like this and we did use it in the sense of a special use permit, where we could consider the specific properties in question or applications for adaptive reuse, to have an acceptable use for R1, an acceptable use list for R2, R3, and phase it in that way, so that we're not saying no to any of the zones, but having a predefined list of acceptable uses for consideration?
That was our vision, that each zone would have its list of things that you all would consider be a special use. So they could be different, but we would imagine they would be different, because once again, you get into the multifamily zones, you're getting more that could offer some more flexibility than you would say want to do in your RE or R1A zones.
But if we were to adapt that list, and let's say, for example, hypothetically, we were to put in the R1 acceptable use list, art galleries, museums, limited restaurant and food service, there still would be an application process where, for that particular parcel, if somebody came and said, I'm applying for adaptive reuse permit to, or whatever we would call it, for a restaurant, and we could still say, no, even though it's on the list, we're not going to go with it here because of either parking or noise concerns, or adjacent owners being opposed. And I like that approach of having the flexibility, not wide open, but to have some guidance. And I would like to see staff proceed with crafting something for us to begin looking at approval, or recommendation for approval to council.
Tim, question I've got, I like what Jason says. Is there a way that neighborhood input could be added into there?
I think
through the special use permit would include that, correct?
Correct. I mean, I believe the two questions, one for Jason, that yes, I mean, there would be similar to a special use permit. It's that whole compatibility with the neighborhood type thing. You look at noise, light, traffic, things like that. So yes, there would be criteria for you all to judge each individual special use permit that would come before you with an adaptive reuse. And to you, Mark, yes, there would be public notification and we could define whatever area you wanted to define within a X radius or feet or something to the not just adjacent property owners, but it could be within 1,000 feet or something of it. We could set those limits for the input, and then still have other people. The signage would go up, and they could do like they do now. Once again, just direct mails, we send it to specific people, but then we post the signage where anybody that sees the sign can look at that sign and call in and talk about it with staff and with planning commission. So,
Tim, if I could add something, I'm a little leery of the idea that you would refuse somebody. You would refuse somebody permission to use property for a use that's generally acceptable, subject to conditions based on neighborhood opposition, because I think that it puts planning commission at risk of having its decisions overturned by a court. So I would probably advise steering clear of the planning commission being allowed to take neighborhood opposition into account in a decision like this. You know, we talked a little bit a couple of months ago about rezoning decisions and how rezoning decisions, you know, are basically legislative decisions. I don't know that, I'm not sure how other cities are treating it, but if they're not, unless we really treat this as more of a legislative decision that's actually going to go on to city council, I think neighborhood opposition is probably a dangerous ground to refuse somebody this kind of permit.
But I'm not saying, I guess it's like our special use now, they get input from the public, that's, they don't have to, that shouldn't be your sole reason to not do it. It would have to be a compatibility reason, but there might,
Right. I think that
there might be something the public adds that we didn't see.
certainly they could come and bring information, but if the only reason to refuse the application is because the neighborhood is opposed to it, if it meets all the other conditions, then I think you're on very dangerous ground to when you turn that down.
Correct. Agreed.
Well, what kind of grounds would it be if you approved it and the neighborhood rioted?
Well, hopefully we wouldn't be doing something that would make the neighborhood that angry.
Well, you never know.
I think I think this could be similar. The workshops and research I've seen on trails and greenways are that frequently the opposition that comes from adjoining property owners is mitigated once the trail or greenway is in and it's used and they feel safe, and sometimes those folks end up being the biggest supporters and the biggest users of it afterwards. So I would hope that some of that could be possibly true, that people are wary of change in their neighborhood and that it could end up that it's a very positive for the folks that live there, not just the folks that use those services. I like the uses that have been listed. There's probably some others. I would think if we're looking at criteria for each one that in any zone, because I look at Rosemont that's in R1, correct?
It's R2.
It's R2. Okay. But it has lots of parking around it that is a buffer in and of itself. So anyway, I think it really depends on the individual spot. So
it's that whole
I think what Margaret,
compatibility piece, like our special use permits now.
Jason,
I think what Margaret just said is very relevant and important. Change is a hard thing to accept for a lot of people, most. This is a new concept for Bristol. It's not a new concept for a lot of communities across the country and close to us. And it comes down to the difference of perception and reality. And I think our culture has become more controlled by perception in recent years than reality. And so as we perceive and as the public perceives, as we discuss this issue, as Margaret said, once something happens and they become familiar with the reality of whatever it is that happens, whether it be a park or a greenway, that perception changes and they realize very quickly that what they perceived was false, what they thought was wrong, what they were told was wrong. And I'll just make that note that not just with planning and use of property, but perception versus reality is something that I wish we would come a little bit more closer as a culture and as a society to the reality side of things and the perception side.
good job, Jason. What I would think would be good, and whether we could keep working on this, whether we even decide on stuff, but once we are back into public meetings with people in person, just like we had some meetings on historic zoning and did we have preservation? We didn't even have that in public. It was the historic zoning stuff that we had. Anyway, to have some public education meetings, and preferably ones maybe that are recorded and then can be available afterwards too. But just some public introduction of some things so people start getting some ideas. Also invite developers to it as well. So just trying to help change that perception, Jason, on the outset so that it can be received more favorably by at least some folks who are seeing what's happening.
Danielle, I've got a question. I'm kind of curious about something. I heard what you said. How's that any different than every time we have something that comes in front of us, regardless of what it is? We have a public hearing and we take the neighborhood's thoughts into consideration every time we make a decision. How would this be any different?
You know, I think you guys do listen to the neighborhood's comments and concerns. I guess what I'm trying to draw a clear distinction between is there are functions that the Planning Commission assumes that are basically legislative functions, where as legislators, you do get to listen to neighborhood opposition and say, you know what, the neighborhood doesn't like this. We're not going to, you know, rezone all this property B3. There are other functions where when you are basically given a job by the ordinance that is to determine whether an application meets certain criteria, you can listen to the public and certainly get public input, but if you base your disapproval of an application on public criteria or on just public opposition, instead of saying this application doesn't meet the criteria that council has set out for us, and therefore we're not approving it, then you would be on very shaky ground. And I hope that staff would probably try to steer you away from that. So I guess there's a difference between listening to the public and inviting their input and deciding against certain applications based solely on their opposition.
You couldn't include public input as one of the criteria?
Maybe. I'd like to try to find some other ordinances where that's been done in other cities. That's because when you do that, you really are giving the neighbors almost a veto over how somebody uses their property. And I'd like to see that in action before we go ahead and adopt something like that in Bristol.
Yeah, I mean, Kelly, just imagine, you know, if somebody came and complained and we still allowed it, well, then they go to court and say, well, look, your ordinance says any you know, and I mean, it just seems weird that would be a criteria. I mean, we take it, we take their advice and their opinions, but it's not, we're not held to doing it just based on public opposition.
I still have to think, who are we here to serve?
Part of it is what's the highest and best use or the property, right? So.
Yeah, we're here to serve the entire city, not just the local neighbors.
But yeah, but that includes listening to everybody.
It certainly does.
And considering what they're saying.
This won't be easy.
What'd you say?
I said this will not be easy.
If it was easy, we wouldn't have
What I'd like to do, Mr. Chairman, as staff, is us do a couple of things. Is one, we can start trying to tailor something for y'all to really discuss and look at, some sort of super raw draft of a regulation. And number two, and put Sheriff on the spot coming up. And she'll say like, I'm going on leave here, so Merry Christmas, and you can deal with it, Tim. But anyway, try to get, see if we can get somebody in to talk to the Planning Commission and us, speaker, somebody that has dealt with this, to just give us a question and answer of somebody that has gone through this, be it another jurisdiction or somebody that deals with it all the time. Sort of like Margaret said, the downtown historic or the historic regs and not regs, but the guidelines and some of the other things we've done where we've got people in to speak to us, some professionals. So we'll see if we can find somebody that'd be willing to do that. But
That would be great
it
with
won't
an
be
hour credit.
anything. I don't envision we'll have anything next month for you on this, but if I don't hear any opposition, we will move forward with doing something to try to get it back in front of you as we can put it together here.
Well, I'm just
Hey,
going to
there-
reiterate what I said last time. This idea of putting restaurants and retail and everything else in the middle of the, I mean, if you're talking a school, a library, art gallery, that's low intensity use. But I mean, I don't know anybody that wants a restaurant to go right next door. I don't care if it's great because you've been there and you know, I mean, you can talk about Jay Frank's, but how many of us would like to have a restaurant right next door? I mean, this body last year voted against putting electronic signs in residential areas specifically for churches and schools because it was going to be disruptive. And now we're saying, well, sure, you know, have cars come and go, have traffic, have people parking next to your house. I mean, I'm sorry. This seems like we're trying to find a back door to allow commercial into into a residential neighborhood, and I'm against that.
I
I
think
will
Sharon-
officially take away your ability to say that you do not know anyone who would support, under the right application, a restaurant next to their property. So on record as saying you know somebody at this point.
Do you live in a neighborhood where it would be possible?
It doesn't matter where I live or would live. I would be in support of it.
Okay. Staff is going to work on this and get back with us. Is there any other input we need to give them at this time?
Just one question on the Rosemont School. Is there anything pressing on that particular building, or I think maybe a meeting or two ago, there was something mentioned that someone had an interest in doing something, but didn't know what that something was?
So the owners of that building, I mean, they're very anxious to move forward with their project, and they have some ideas for the building, but they know that to be able to fulfill some of these ideas, they need an ordinance change. So they're following this process closely. I think that they watch the meetings and usually get in touch with me within a couple days to just follow up and see how things are progressing or what to expect. But they know we're working on it, but I think they're very anxious to move forward when anything changes. And I think that their focus right now is just doing some cleanup in and around that building to do some maintenance and yard work and all that good stuff. But I think I would say that they are, you know, they follow up after every meeting to talk through where we are in the process, but they know that we're working on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else? We'll go to temporary signs then.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, up next for discussion, and Sheriff can give you a quick presentation, but we want to continue the discussion on temporary signage and specifically looking at the number of temporary signs. And we're just calling that now currently temporary signs, so don't anybody get hung up on temporary sign verbiage. But she has some homework she had done and gone out and stuck a bunch of signs in Kelly's yard, I think, but stuck a bunch of signs up so y'all could get some visual representation of 101 per 100 foot and 3 per road frontage on lots in residential areas. So anyway, with that, Sheriff, if you want to give the presentation.
Okay, so this one again is a visual exercise for you all. And this is just the summary of the discussion points that we've kind of been talking about. And I think Tim may be like, wait a minute, but I think if we can get some direction on this maximum number of signs question, then we can really start rolling forward with filling in all the other gaps. So if we can kind of get this from you, we would be happy, and then can kind of start taking some better next steps to define this ordinance a little bit better. But it's really hard to do sitting here talking about it month to month. So like Tim said, I trudged out to take some pictures. I won't identify any, well, I probably will, but it was, there were definitely necks that break when you go out and put 6 or 7 signs in somebody's yard, even though I had permission to do it. But what we'll do is I'll just say on this top row, maximum number of signs, this is just the kind of working draft we've been bouncing around with here for the past couple meetings and some last year. The discussion has been to put a maximum number of signs for residential zones at 3, so 3 total signs. As I got out looking at this stuff in the field, and we'll show you here on the pictures, we probably need to clarify some what happens if it's a corner lot. So do we mean 3 total, absolute total, or do we mean 3 per street frontage? And also, do we require any kind of specific spacing for these things? So again, as you look at this, at these photos, it may not be as big of a deal in the residential zone, but could be a big deal in the commercial zone. And then under the commercial, so I got to get this laser out of the way somehow. Sorry, this is not cooperating with me.
Sheriff?
Sorry. Yeah.
Sheriff? Yeah, I think, I mean, maybe somebody can correct me, but I think I'm trying to remember, I guess it was a year, maybe 2 years ago, when we were talking about this, I think we got to 3 in the residential because we talked about corner lot, like having one on each side and then in the corner. And we said, well, that, and even for, what we thought was temporary, that wouldn't be too bad for just even a single one. Does anybody remember that? Or am I just misremembering?
I think that's the way I remember it as well. 3 total.
Okay. Well, that one may be an easy first decision. I took pictures both ways so you can see if it makes sense to just do it 3 total. We can see that here in just a second. And that might very well be the case of how we ended that discussion.
Sure, the limit on the number of signs in the residential zone would not apply. That number would not apply to the exempt signage, for example, political signs, or would it?
No, political signs are regulated by state law, and those are a beast unto themselves.
So I mean, you could have hypothetically 20 political signs, and so that category of sign, I'm just using it as one of the examples that are exempt. Noting that is 3 excessive? What signs would you be limited to for 3?
Whatever
what would that?
Whatever they wanted to put on the signs, it wouldn't be content specific.
Yeah, I'll just show you. Let me show you. I'll go to the residential ones first. So here's a house. It's got about 65 feet of road frontage, and this is 3 of our public notice signs out in their front yard. So there's one that faces parallel with the street. So, this one, again, it's public notice signs, but it could say, my kid is an honor student. There's this one here. There's this one here. It's a pretty typical little, downtown neighborhood lot size. Would somebody put out all 3 of those? Possibly. And is that too much?
Here again, they're temporary though, right? I mean, is there a time limit on them?
Well, the thing we're wrestling with, and that's why I said don't get hung up on the temporary verbiage, is how do you regulate that? Because if you put a time limit and say, you've got to change it, can't be the same sign for more than a month, they go and change it to something else, or, I mean, it'd be very hard to regulate. So,
Yeah.
and especially not singling out content, but a realtor sign may be out there for a lengthy period of time,
Years.
maybe not in the market right now, but certainly they can be out there for a long period of time if it was to do with selling or renting the property or something. So that's why I don't get hung up on that temporary verbiage. That's just what we're calling them right now, for lack of a better term. But basically, we want to take all the sign section, the first part except political signs, and condense it and make it clear on signage that you would have to, that would be allowed on properties, be it residential or commercial, outside your freestanding, your signs, your actual billboards, or your freestanding signs for commercial developments. So
How do you tell if it's a political sign without reading it?
Hey, can I address this, Tim?
Yep, maybe.
So, Mr. Buck, the state has basically passed a law that says if it's a political sign, it gets to stay up, regardless of the municipality's ordinances. And political signs don't just include support of a particular candidate, but they include issue signs. And so the state has, in my view, created a content-based distinction among signs. Jason may disagree with me because he's had the professional dealings with this, but I don't know how that is enforceable. But we're not going to try to take on the state on this. Our sign ordinance, or my recommendation would be that we just carve out an exception for political signs as it's defined in the state law and move on and try to regulate everything else. And, as you guys recall, the reason we're wrestling, sorry, I just went East Tennessee. The reason that we're wrestling, the reason we're wrestling with the temporary signs is that right now our temporary sign regulation has a lot of content-based distinctions.
So on that note, and perhaps I shouldn't have, I use political signs as the only reference that's the most relevant to me, but in terms of signs that does not meet the requirements to be restricted based on the ordinance, my concern was more related to 3 signs seems to be excessive. And if there's I don't want to get caught in the weeds on this. If there's no one else, if everybody is comfortable with 3 signs, I'll be comfortable with 3 signs. I just think that's too much. And I would also say on the note for the corner lots on the commercial and the residential, obviously the residential is more confined to a specific number regardless of road frontage. So I would say that we don't expand it for a corner lot, that we leave it the same in the residential zone. And then on the commercial side, perhaps if it is a corner lot, that there would be more of a restriction than 1 sign per 100 linear feet of road frontage. It's just my thought, and I would welcome the opportunity to hear from other members on their thoughts.
So can we just, since she's got the slides up, Sheriff's showing a corner lot here of some unknown house in the city, maybe. But anyway, nice looking house except for the UT flag, but we'll get over that. But that's a corner lot, and there's 6 signs per row. You can see it gets cluttered up there. And even if you took 3 away, is 3 a good number? And realize they could be anything from a realtor sign as one of them to all 3 of them being whatever else they want to put on them, not political based, but we won't regulate that, but other than per state law. But it could say, I bought a home improvement by so-and-so. It could be my kid's an honor student. And, that's what we're talking about, is the sheer number. Sheriff, can you back it up to that other slide?
Yep.
Do we feel, and here's basically what we said originally, and Scott, I think I agree, that we talked about the corner lot and the possibility of, just 3 period, regardless of corner or or not, is 3 right here. These are the standard, what are they, 2 by 18 or 2 by, I think they're 2 by 18, 1.5, 2 by 1.5 signs. So are we comfortable with that number? I mean, that's really for residential areas. That would be my first question.
Well, let me ask you this. Is it fair for us to think in our mind as we're looking at a number to think, what if everybody on the street maxed out on signs? What would it look like?
Yes.
Is that a fair thought?
Absolutely, because if that'd be for any parcel, if everybody put up signs, they could put up that max number of signs. So that is something to be thinking of also. And my thing to always remember, and it's not that I'm not trying to be content based, but always remember the real estate or for rent signs, because obviously that happens. People sell their homes, they rent their homes. So there's obviously a need for one sign as a minimum. Just now, if you're selling your home, would you allow them to have another sign that said something else? Not that the rentals get special thing, but at least the opportunity to put up another sign if they choose to use one of those signs as a for sale sign or for rent sign. So our suggestion as staff would be at least 2 signs. Now, the question is, do you want to go more than 2 signs? We talked about the 3 number previously, and we just wanted to give a visual of that as we had discussed previously. So that is the residential question right now.
I'm more inclined to be supportive of a limit of 2, regardless of whether it's a corner lot or not.
Yeah. I mean, if someone wants to put a lot of different content, they can rotate them out, but just to have signs everywhere, it just kind of doesn't look well. But I think 2 would be plenty.
I'm okay with 3, but rather than limiting it with quantity, I would limit it by total square footage. Say 9 square foot, regardless of quantity 1, 2, or 3.
Let me give you the general thought of a residential agent when they've got a house for sale. They're normally comfortable with the one sign in front of the house. However, if it's a corner lot, they would look to have one on each street. That being said, if they ever do an open house, instead of putting a bag over the sign that says open house, they may want to throw a sign on there that says open house. Sometimes it'll put out there saying we're going to have an open house this Sunday, or sometimes it's just merely out there during the open house.
Yeah, that's what I remembered, that discussion was that exactly that. If it's a corner, you have one on each road and then, another sign for whatever. And that not just real estate, but anything the owner wanted to do. And we just said, yeah, 3, 3 is even in a non-corner. That's the exact conversation I remember us having and how we got to 3.
So KB, and that's another way to do it, is limit the square footage. It gets a little hard to regulate if they get little tiny signs out there and put 50 of them, KB, but I
Well,
understand.
you can still limit the number, but also limit the total amount of square footage so that
Yes. So
you
one
could
sign could be bigger than the other, but you're limiting the total, right? That's what we've talked about as staff also.
What if it were 2 signs, or 3 if it's a corner?
I have no objections with that.
That can work.
Jason, does that sound decent on that?
I mean, I prefer to stay at 2, but since I like Kelly, I'll go along with his idea, but only because I like Kelly.
Hey, I've got some political signs in my basement I'll let you put out.
Oh, thank you.
So for size, just, the size is changing. The census signs were the new plastic ones that go over as opposed to the corrugated plastic ones that stick up. And they're a little bit, I don't know if the overall size is still the same. They may be shorter and longer. But anyway, we may see more changes in different kinds of temporary signs for sizes.
So Tim, is there any existing regulations on lighting a temporary sign?
No.
I mean, I'm thinking, people are getting awful creative these days. Are they going to put spotlights and string Christmas lights and flashing lights?
Once again,
Could we, if we wanted to?
Our lighting ordinance just, it's that 1/2 foot candle, 2 foot candle, but that's talking commercial stuff, industrial stuff. It doesn't delve into the residential properties about light spillage. So I don't think Danielle does it. I think it's really specific to commercial, and if I can recall off the top of my head.
I don't think it actually, well, no, it does say outdoor lighting fixtures on all property except single family and 2-family residences on single lots.
Yes.
So you're looking at residential there.
Multifamily and right.
Right. Or you're looking at multifamily and commercial. I think
right.
If somebody, I don't know, it might be a code issue if somebody put permanent lighting out there to light up their temporary signs, but although probably not. I guess you can do that if you're owner of the property.
Our current lighting reg does not address that, other than it says it doesn't for single and 2-family dwellings on single properties. So not that the reg can't be changed to do that, but that brings a whole set of different things into play. But they are getting creative nowadays with signage. People are.
So you've had to restrict people from flying drones and search far and wide to do so, and come up with the fact that it's within the airport runway restricted area. Yes, they are getting creative.
They are getting creative.
So can we have anything about maintenance? I know we can't, putting time is difficult, and it probably would take a lot for a corrugated sign to look really ratty, but is that?
I would suggest, yes, that you say that the signs have to be maintained in good condition and have a kind of a definition of what good condition is. If you've got I'm a proud parent of a Viking sign outside, eventually if you could just leave it out for years, it's going to look bad.
But we'll have to define the good condition, which we could do.
Right.
So I guess, is everybody, not everybody, but are the majority of y'all comfortable with 2 per lot and on a corner lot 3?
Yeah, but I still don't get why you have 3 on a corner lot.
That's true. You don't really need 3. You could have 1 on each.
I mean, 1 on each side of the house, or the 1 on one street, 1 on the other.
My thought process there is, if you've got a for sale sign on each street, that means you cannot put up my kid as a grade A student. That was my thought on that.
Oh, okay.
My thought is, my guess is, as a realtor selling a house, you would recommend to people that they don't put those kind of signs when they're trying to sell their house. But I'm not a realtor.
Okay, so Sheriff, go to the commercial. I think we've got good guidance on residential. And I'll hit the commercial slides. Please, ma'am. Okay, there you go. And that's one, if I'm reading that right, that's 1 sign. This is the fire station and police area down along Exide. That's one sign every 100-foot spacing on that property.
Is that not on the right of way, Tim?
I pulled them up right after she put them out. I had public.
They were out there for all of 11 minutes, I promise.
Okay, okay.
Would it be simpler,
$50
Tim,
fine.
to restrict the number on commercial as well, than use a reference to how much road footage? My question is, how often do you all have to go out and determine how many signs are permissible by measuring road frontage?
Right now, they are not permissible, period, in commercial. So
Okay.
if you've got a sign like this in commercial, we've been lenient during COVID to try to, so businesses could advertise their opening things. But as we're coming, hopefully out of COVID, we will start going back and letting them understand that unless it's a special promotion, that they cannot have the temporary signage like this in commercial areas.
I mean,
I
that's,
would be more in favor of 100 feet seems a little too lenient, either extending or increasing the feet of road frontage requirement, or just specifying a number for each commercial lot, say 6 or double whatever's residential.
Well, it's a lot of signs. I mean, you can, the city's pretty good right now, but there's some examples if you drive down the parkway of a lot of signs, temporary signs on commercial that provide a good visual. Like I said, currently our regulation does not allow them, and it's a very clean look. I mean, very clean look when you don't allow them. Obviously, once again, from not content-based standard, but there are people, realtors that we all love and enjoy that have, we've got to at least allow one sign. Doesn't matter what it says, but one sign so that the real estate people could actually post something on the property if it were for sale or rent. So there is that standard of at least one. I would always suggest at least one sign for that for a purpose. Keeping in mind our people that do make a living on real estate. So, and people that want to sell their property and transition their property and rent their property. So.
I mean, has that been working okay, Tim? Has there been any pushback or?
No, not really. I mean, like I said, during COVID, we sort of
Right.
looked the other way because we wanted people to know they were open, and there was just extenuating circumstances there. But prior to that, it was very, people grumble about it, but we really didn't have a lot of pushback.
But if you're going back and
once you get to that point in any reg being that clean, once you get over that initial hurdle of everybody that used to do it that way, getting to the new reg and understanding it, it's applied that way for years, they get used to it.
But if you're going from 0 and giving 1, I think it would be a plus.
Correct. I mean, the one being, obviously, we've got to at least do one. I mean,
Sure, yeah. But prior to that, was it always 1 or?
There was, the real estate had an exception.
Okay.
But so we could still have an exception?
We can't do content-based, so it can't be an exception.
Okay, gotcha.
They can choose to have it a real estate sign, but they don't have to have it that. They could put up something else.
Tim, are you saying that real estate signs technically are not allowed in commercial? We just kind of let it happen?
No, real estate signs are currently by our regs allowed in commercial areas.
Our regs are not up to.
Our regs do not meet the new state Supreme Court or
because of the content deal.
Because of content based.
What about these 10-foot flag signs? Are they?
They are allowed for currently special events.
Okay.
And once again, we've been a little lenient on those during COVID because, there's been some extenuating circumstances for businesses. But we have started revisiting people with flags out with the regs, our current regs, and when they can put them up, when they can't. Obviously, they can't be in the right of way. So we have started visiting people with the flags up, those feathered flags.
As I remember, it seems like we had people come get a permit for those.
They do. They have to get a permit for those.
With the
And
time.
only allowed certain amount during the year that they
Yeah.
can have them out.
Okay, that's what I
But
thought.
with the new regs, once again, when we craft it, you will not see, I mean, you won't, because once again, it can't be content based. Then that flag, we will look at that and propose some regulation for you all on those feathers, if y'all choose to allow them to be used. But it can't be content based. So that's just, if you want to put a feather up, you can put it up certain time of year or so many times a year.
What are
So
the
what we're
thoughts
trying
of
to do
treating
is take
commercial
those
just like
regs-
the residential?
Pardon me?
What would be the thought of, what would be, if we just treated commercial the same way we do residential, 2 for a normal lot and 3 for a corner lot?
We can do that.
Did we
That's
say
what-
3 for a corner lot, or were we leaning toward just 2, period?
Most everybody was 3 and 2 that I saw with thumbs up on the majority. I'm not saying everybody, but the majority seemed to go with the 3 and 2 in the residential. And we'll propose it that way, and you all can always, obviously, at some point, you're gonna have to vote on it, so. Or tell us to change it before you vote on it or something, but, if that's what everybody's comfortable with, we can craft it that way. Once
What
again,
did we,
currently, our regs do not allow temporary signage in commercial. So,
So
Didn't
Tim, remind me, do we still have exception for race week? Or is that under the special times of the
we
year?
might not see those during race week. There's not a written regulation, anything about race week.
Okay.
It's just, we might not see those.
Oh, I see.
I think it falls under the category of it's Bristol, baby.
We just might not see those during race. I mean, we got so much going on and staying busy with our codes.
Gotcha.
And people doing other things that we might not. And once
Tim-
again, the reality of, anyway, we just might not see them. But by the time you got them through the system, they may be gone anyway.
Gotcha.
we talked about size of commercial signs once before?
We had the size, if Sheriff, you want to back up to that chart you had. Oops, sorry. We had, you can see the maximum sign area, commercial industrial zone, y'all had settled on.
Okay. I can remember there was huge signs all over the Kmart parking lot at one time, and that kind of brought things to attention.
So that's the size that we had, I think everybody had felt comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
And that said, I'm a lot more comfortable regulating the total area of signs than the quantity.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with what you said, Kevin. I just don't know. I would defer to staff how difficult that would be to enforce.
Well, I think the biggest thing where we have been and how clean it has looked would be if you go with the total and don't put a number on it, then you might get like 48 square, you might get 6 signs of the small variety on one parcel there or 32 would be 4 signs. I mean, it just becomes, at what point, as somebody had mentioned earlier, in the residential area, if every commercial put up
Mm-hmm.
6
Would it
signs
be-
or more,
would it-
4 or more, at what point does it just look not a good look? I mean, aesthetics weigh in.
Would it be?
Aesthetics do weigh in, but also the signs as they become smaller, they become less effective. So they don't have as much use to the owner.
There are some examples on the Parkway I would suggest you just drive down and look at right now that
How is-
private property that you might want to see that you're like, wow, that's a lot of signs. So,
Tim, there on the parkway,
Can you read?
there's a moving church sign on the parkway. Have you noticed that? All
yes,
along.
we've got an action on that we're working through.
Okay. I just wondered how that fall in, what that fall into, you know?
Well, that we're working through that with the owners through our process of you're not in compliance with our regulations. So,
Yeah. Would it be feasible for a large commercial sign to have a permit? Could it be regulated that way? Like a 4x8 sign that shows something for sale?
well, I mean, we could, but these signs are unregulated permit wise right now.
Okay.
And it saves a lot of paperwork and that's
Okay.
basically what we're talking about is more the unpermitted.
So it's not feasible.
In that first section, there's a group of things that are unpermitted, then there's a group of things that are permitted, and we're trying to condense it all because of the content base down so it's simpler for people to understand.
Okay.
And simpler to enforce versus how it's written, all that first part of the sign regs. And then you get into your standard signage that you see, your pylons or monument signs for the actual business that's on the property, businesses. So these are more the unpermitted signage on properties is what we're talking about.
Let me make sure I understand this. The current ordinance is 3 temporary signs for residentially zoned properties.
It doesn't speak to residential properties. They're unpermitted.
So we're putting a new limit on residential of 3 signs. There's no limit currently, right?
It's not, they're unpermitted. So as long as they meet those specific criteria, they're permitted. So say if you had 3 different contractors working on your house, you could have Joe's contractors working here. You could have a real estate sign. So yes.
But you could have 6 if you wanted to.
As long as it met
Okay,
those
so
criteria.
we're now saying that there's a restriction on the number of non-permitted signs, at 2 for a non-corner lot and 3 for a corner lot. And there is no permitted signage for commercial. So if we're going from 0 to something, and I'm very concerned about the aesthetics as you've mentioned, you know, the proposal of 1 per 100 feet, definitely not, but I would say no more than 3 for a corner lot, no more than 2, and maybe just 1. Maybe just 1 if we're going from 0. Maybe just 1.
I think we're not going from 0, we're going from unlimited in residential zone.
No, he's talking commercial now.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't follow that.
Yeah. So residential in general, yes, you're going from unlimited, but it has to be one of those criteria that are in the ordinance now to 2 or 3 if you're on a corner lot, if that's what y'all choose. Commercial, you're going from, currently we allow real estate signage in our ordinance. But other than that, there's not, the temporary signage is not allowed. So basically besides real estate signage, you're going to something if you choose to, other than real estate currently.
The reason I suggested matching the residential 2 and 3 on a commercial is if I'm a commercial property owner and someone from the city comes out and says, you have 3 signs and you're limited to 1 or none, you're not allowed any. And I'm adjacent to a residentially zoned property or 2 or 3, and they have signs. And I'm going to say, well, what about them? They can have them. They're right across the street or they're right next door. Well, they're residential and you're commercial. I would be like, that would confuse me. That would frustrate me. So I think it would be more consistent to say whatever we end up doing for residential, we do for commercial and have the same across the board ordinance.
Everybody comfortable with that, or not everybody, but the majority? Yes, no.
I'd hate to see a limit on somebody trying to sell the Exide property. Seems like it would get lost.
What you have up on the screen right now goes into acreage, and obviously a single sign on 10 acres or a single sign on 5 acres, it's not necessarily enough, at least from the commercial real estate side.
Tim, quick question. So if an employer was going to say throw a job fair, they would be limited to 2 or 3 signs if we follow the residential model, correct?
They would be, the content would not be regulated, but yes, if they wanted help wanted or something, that would be one of their signs that they would be allowed to have, yes. It would fall into the, it would have to be like if they got 3 signs, one of the 3 or all of the 3 could say help wanted or job fair, or you see what I'm saying there on that? Yeah.
And maybe we should use the language up to 3 signs across the board for everyone.
I think there's this distinction between residential and commercial, though. In my thinking of how I view something.
So don't forget, these are temporary signs. The commercial has signs and we have regulations for those. So it's not their only signage. They've got a lot provided with their permanent signage. So just FYI.
Yeah, these are what we would, and like I said, use temporary light, but, or lightly, but unpermitted signage that they're allowed. Ones they don't have to come and get a permit from us.
So if you're in a commercial zone, you're in the right zoning to allow for a LED sign or a digital sign. You can change the message on that sign as often as you want. If you're in a commercial zone and you've got a sign that has messaging with the permanent letters or the removable letters, you can change your messaging on that, in addition to the fact that you've got your business being advertised. I just think when you go from 0 to something, it would be hard for anybody to justify looking the gift horse in the mouth, so to speak. And going back to the reverse, if I'm a residential property and I've got 4 signs and the commercial property next to me's got 10, I'm kind of wondering why treat somebody differently based on the use of their property, in light of the fact that a commercial property by right, to a certain degree, has the right to get a permitted sign in addition to their non-permitted or temporary signs.
I mean, my thing is, I'm not really married to either or, but, following that logic, if you were in a residential zone and your neighbor across the street who was on the corner lot had 3 signs and you had 3 signs, but you weren't on a corner lot, I mean, you would have that same argument against your neighbor. Hence the reason why I said up to 3.
Tim, I'm trying to visualize what you're talking about on the parkway on temporary signs that you want us to take a hard look at on things that other than real estate, which of course right now is allowed by our ordinance.
Yeah, just drive down the parkway and you'll see. I don't want to give out, point out things on the meeting, but there's some good examples of more than 3 signs on the parkway.
And are those signs right now non-compliant signs?
Correct.
Okay, so they're being allowed because of COVID.
We have not chosen to be as strict on those regs because of COVID. Yes, sir.
So a large part of the discussion tonight is whether or not we want to allow that, regulate that on post-COVID.
Allow it. Like I said, you don't have to, but there would be no way that I would feel comfortable making a recommendation to you all to have anything less than 1. So 0 to me is not a good number to be at. 1 is like I said, you've always got to keep the real estate in mind, even though it can be something other than real estate. You can't specify that it's for real estate. It can be anything. If they choose to use it for something other than real estate and then want to put up real estate, they would have to change that sign out. But you have to have a minimum of 1 that I would always recommend. But currently, other than that, there's none of the unpermitted signs allowed in commercial.
So basically the box that we are in is because we know you got to have real estate signs. And since you can't do content, that is going to open the window for other folks to do non-real estate signage.
If they choose so, but if you only had 1, then they'd have to make a choice of, do I put up my properties for sale or put something else? And any sign, it's not saying that you can't have multiple things on one sign. It's just, and that's KB where your square footage and stuff can kick in, but you could have for sale and then you could have whatever else. I mean, they could say whatever, different things, as long as it didn't exceed the square footage on the signage allowed, the square footage. So it's not regulating how much you can say on a sign and what you say on a sign as much as the number and the square footage is the key to settle on from a planning commission perspective. And I think we had the square footage. That's what we all, I think, had settled on the square footage. And we just wanted to clarify on the number of signs.
I don't think I would be in favor of anything more than 3 on any property. And going back to the mayor's comment about 2, my comment about 2, I think at some point, the square footage, the amount of road frontage, you just got to give something up at some point. You have to say, all right, yeah, you've got 600 feet of road frontage and the residential lot has, less than 100 or right at 100. If you're going to do it, you just 1 step forward, 2 steps back in some cases. And I think the major concern is aesthetics more than anything. And then I have to say to myself, well, are we getting really bent out of shape over the aesthetic of a sign when there's streets that have RVs parked what appears to be in the right of way? And some of you may know what I'm talking about.
I do.
And what's worse, a sign that says I had my heating and air installed by and having 6 of those, or that huge RV in the car that's sitting behind it?
Well, we might
that doesn't ever move.
Too.
Okay, good.
Well, Tim, let me ask the question this way. As written on the commercial signs and what is on the volunteer parkway right now, if this was being enforced, would that clean up the volunteer parkway that you're sending us down there to look at?
It might clean up 1 or 2, or it might clean up some, but not lessen the impact of it. A couple of them, but it just, once again, it's an aesthetic thing. I mean, where you are now, and it's hard to, pre-COVID's a year. I mean, that's hard to imagine, but it has been a year. And to visualize that on the parkway prior to the, going into COVID, but to us, it's just I'm sure the planning commission had a hard time last time and probably talked a lot maybe about temporary signage.
See, what I was thinking, if you take the first and second line together and combine those, that is going to limit the number of signs that could be out there. They're having to be 100 foot apart. They can only be so big.
Well, once again, that was that visual Sheriff had on Exide, that those were the small 6 square foot signs, and that was 1 per 100 feet. And Sheriff, you want to pop that graphic back up on that?
Kelly, I think I was saying earlier, I don't think we should regulate 1 per, however, I mean, if we're going to do by feet, that's fine, but I don't think we should. I think we just limit a raw number regardless of the road frontage. And not require, I mean, they can all be together or they can be spread apart, whatever you choose to be, wherever you choose to put them, but the number is the number.
And
And
that's what this image
that's
shows.
with no spacing right there. Go to the one where it had the,
So here, if you look at these posts for reference, this is essentially spaced out down the entire 700 plus feet of road frontage. So here's these posts right here. So you can see it's all down this fence line. But this one is sandwiched up to where it's just really in front of these buildings. So that's 7 signs in probably 200 feet.
Looks like Burma shave signs, the highway. Yep.
Showing your age.
I know, Kelly, you laughed.
I knew it.
So
Yeah, that could be
Kelly,
distracting to a driver as well if you got them all clustered up. You know, somebody be trying to, read everything, then they're taking their eyes off the road a long time as well.
so
they
Kelly,
could-
for your commercial signs, I would assume for a lot of your commercial properties, people aren't seeing that they're for sale by a sign. And like Exide, that's not being seen by somebody that's looking at websites, seeing what's available. It's economic development people pushing it, et cetera. So anyway, Kelly, you shook your head no that.
Exide, maybe I can see a little merit to that argument, but other things, the sign is the lifeblood for commercial real estate.
Okay.
So let me go back to the real estate sign, and I may be confused. So, Tim, you were saying that by law or by exemption, we have to allow a for sale sign or a for rent sign on commercial property?
no.
No? Okay.
Currently,
you're-
our regulations allow the real estate signs. Under the content-based, no content-based, you can't distinguish whether it's real estate. You just got to say you can have a sign. Now, if they choose to use it as a real estate sign, they can. If they choose to use it as my employees love parties or something, I mean, they could put that on there. It's not content-based. You can't limit the signage based on the content.
So you're saying the case law, which is what precipitated the state law on political signs, has now developed to the point where, and I understand, I've heard you loud and clear, content. And I understand why you're saying it, and I understand what you're saying. But you're saying now the ordinance that exists to allow real estate signs, commercial real estate or for sale signs, if you will, is no longer considered compliant with the recent rulings, and that we now have to treat those signs as we would any other sign, with the exception of political.
We need to change our regulations to come into compliance with federal and state law on content base. So our regs still are our regs. Now, Danielle, if we got challenged in court, there could be an issue with that, but we're trying to get our regs in compliance with the rulings by the court system.
Yeah, there could be some enforcement issues if with the regs as they currently stand. Because we,
All right, you've answered my question.
yeah.
So y'all want to think about it till next meeting on the commercial more? Cause I mean, it's getting late now, or late in the evening.
So why don't you
I mean, I'm
present to
willing
us
to,
for the
we're all
next,
willing to stay here and talk about it as long as you all are, so I'll leave
Yeah,
that up.
let's take a field trip down the Parkway, Tim.
Or just look around town for
Yeah.
temporary signage or the little stick-up signs in commercial areas. And just get a feel for it. I mean, that's the biggest decision we have as staff is the number of signs, I think, unless you all want to change something else on that chart in your packet. But I think that's the biggest decision left for us to craft the reg is the number.
Tim, we've got a unoccupied auto sales on the Parkway. Are those signs in compliance at all? The numbers, the sizes, the
Just call me afterwards and I'll get the info and we can look at it and tell you, because I can't, I've seen so many, I can't
okay.
picture it off the top of my head, but just let me know afterwards, email me or something and I can check it out and let you know.
I was just curious if that, if what we're looking at on the Parkway there is in compliance.
Yeah, I mean, I'll look if you'll just,
Okay.
like I said, just send me an email or call me after,
Okay.
you know, sometime tomorrow or sometime this week, and we'll look at it. Just the main thing to remember about commercial as currently written, the regs, you can have the real estate signage, but there are no unpermitted signs allowed. Unpermitted being these like are on your screen, the stick-in signs people put up.
Okay.
So again,
And the now hirings are allowed, you know, there's unpermitted things like now hiring that are allowed, but in general, you just need to look at that first section of the regs and you'll see what I'm saying as they're currently written in the signs. But all that has to change to content based.
I have one thought about the small temporary signs that the city puts out. You all have one that goes out that says public notice at the top. Man, you can't read the rest of it before you get by there. I don't know who that sign's supposed to be attracted to.
We have the small ones and then we do put out the larger ones for the bigger ones that have the easier to read on properties. The bigger, I don't know if you've seen those, but there are bigger ones that go out.
I think I have maybe once or twice, but those little ones, man, it's got so much information in there. There's no way you can read that and drive by it.
That's why we put the larger ones out too. So
make a suggestion as we drive down the Parkway, looking at the signs, that each of us reference our streaming music service of choice and listen to the 5-man electrical band sing signs for their signs.
Good one.
All right, is that it on signs for tonight? That brings us to training update. I see we have 2 overachievers.
Well, and I think Malin, you said something about you need the credit for the BZA training, I think is the email that I saw today. So we'll make those corrections.
What I received in my package was the BZA training hours in general.
Oh, really?
For the other, yeah.
Okay, we'll get you the regular one. They stuck it wrong. We were making 3 packets.
I just want to make sure they wasn't going out to everybody, so that's why I sent that note.
Yeah, we'll resend this one out. There's 2 overachievers. We had 3 packets going out that day, and they may have obviously swapped one in. They shouldn't have. But hours are important, and one of the easy ones to pick up is go online, and we'll send this out electronically, so you can just click on the link. But go, and I think Sheriff sent it out. That BZA training is an easy one to watch at your leisure, and just tell us you watched it, and you can get credit. Except for Joel, he's an overachiever, and he's already done that.
Don't I get credit for it?
Not again. You got it for credit on 2 boards already. So Anyway, that's an easy one to pick up. And then we've changed the format. If you'll look, there's some general links. There's a lot of hours you can get at the TAPA website and the Smart Growth Archives. There are a lot of different things to watch on those.
And those are really good.
Mhm. So anyway, you've got till the end of the year. Just keep that in mind. But we want to
If
see
y'all see any good continuing it on adaptive reuse, that'd be great.
I think maybe it wasn't adaptive reuse I saw on one of those sites. Was it, Sheriff?
Well, we actually found one. I'll send it out tomorrow, and I think it's only half an hour. But it's the only. I wish it was a little more regional focused, but it's in Pennsylvania, and it was for elected officials, whatever their equivalent is. But it was about adaptive reuse, so I'll send that out. But we'll keep looking
like
for
half the credit.
Yeah, I think it's about half an hour, so it's quick, but it's definitely tailored to the conversation we've been having.
We could watch it twice, couldn't we?
That's how that
Watch
works.
it December 31st and January 1st. Yes, you could. And you get the credit for the end of the year and one for the next year.
Good, I'll send that link out.
Okay, any other creative suggestions before we go?
Oh, and you will start seeing, I think staff and Sheriff, you can give a quick update, not long, but staff has been working diligently on landscaping regulations to start bringing that to you all as to clean it up, make it easier, make it more user friendly for the public and staff and everybody else, certainly boards and commissions to look at. So they've been working very hard on that. So that is an upcoming to you all to start discussion on.
Staff works hard all the time, Tim. Everybody does a great job.
We appreciate that. They are a wonderful group, certainly.
Good luck, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Were you going to be taking time off soon?
Yeah, here in a couple of months.
Oh, you're not going to, you're still around a couple more months. Okay. That's good. Well, I'll save my comments till later.
I don't think you took any time off on the last one, did you?
6 weeks, maybe. Not long.
Maybe.
It felt like about 3 days, but I think it was.
I think that's what it really was.
Yeah.
All righty. Anything else?
Y'all have a good night.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye.